Kerry back with you today. So I'm back for another Mass Make Monday, and I thought for today's Mass Make we would use up scraps, which is always a winner. And I'm going to call these Scrappy Collage Strips because they're sort of a bit like a collage strip. You could use it as a belly band or pop it onto a back and make it into a tag. So I will gather some supplies off to the side and we will get on and make some of these. So I've just got this tray off to the side that I'll be grabbing from, but I thought I'd just show you what I've got in here. I'm going to be using this large book page as my base. I've got a couple of printed invoices that I'll be tearing bits from, and then I've got just various other paper scraps. Now I've also selected some coloured paper scraps that I want to use on my strips, but you don't have to use colour, you can just keep them neutral or use whatever you want. I do have some of these labels that I have printed. Now these are all the same size and I've picked those specifically for my project, but you can use anything you like. I've got my trusty vintage image strips, but I thought I might also use up some of the vintage fairy strips as well. This is from that box that I pulled from the other day where I made them for something else, couldn't remember, and they've just been sitting aside. So you can probably tell my book page hasn't been printed straight, so my margin is wider here and narrower here, and basically my whole text is a bit skew-whiff. So I'm just going to use a ruler and tear out the text part of this page. I'm using a deckled edge ruler, but again, you just use whatever you feel like. Okay, so my page already sort of lends itself into being torn into three because it's got these columns here, and that'll be a good size for my collage strip anyway, so I'm just going to use those lines as a guide. And the reason I like using the tear ruler, apart from the fact that it gives me a nice sort of uneven edge, is I don't have to be so specific about how I glue things on. If everything's a bit off centre or a little bit skew-whiff, then it looks like it was intended to be that way. Now these are too long, so I'm just going to roughly tear them in half. So I might make a couple of different sizes. Okay, so I've picked three that I've torn out, and I thought we'd just make three different sized ones. Now I've got off to the side here, these are just some coloured paper scraps. Now if you don't have anything with colour on, you can always just use a bit of paint on white paper or some ink just to get some different colours, and I'm working in sort of blues, greens, teals, purples, and I'm just going to roughly tear my strips to the right size of my paper. And that one is a little bit wide for this tiny little strip. And I like to use three different pieces. A bit too much the same. Maybe this one here will be good enough. Alright, so I'm going to move these around so that I've got my light strip at the top and then my mid-tone strip in the middle and the darker one at the bottom. That's just personal preference, doesn't have to be that way. And I'm going to go ahead and pick some other colours for these strips too. Okay, so I've picked my strips and I've stuck to odd numbers just because for me odd numbers seem to look better, but there's no rhyme or reason, you pick however many you like. And when I look at the backgrounds of my pages, there's already a little bit of interest because I've got lines and different size and shapes of font, so I'm going to use that as part of my design. So when I lay these strips out, I want to keep some of the more interesting looking bits of text. So I think I'll pop it like that. And to stick my strips down, I'm actually going to use double-sided tape. Now, I could use glue, but these papers are a little bit thin, and because they've been printed on an inkjet printer, if I use a wet glue, it could affect the way the colour looks. So I'm just going to use some double-sided tape for the moment. So I've got a couple of different widths of double-sided tape here, just because some of these bits are sort of fatter and skinnier, and it will be easier to use a different size tape rather than cut it down. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my double-sided tape, using the skinny tape on the thinner scraps. Oh, don't start. Thank you. Right, so it seems like I had a lot more success with my double-sided tape this time. And now what I want to do is get some white gesso and a brayer, and I'm just going to roughly go over my strips so they are a little bit more muted, and the colour doesn't stand out quite so boldly from the background. So I don't want it to all disappear, I just want it to sort of blend and become one background. This helps mute a little bit of the text as well. Alright, good enough. So I'm just going to give that a quick blast with the heat gun. Okay, now I want to come in with some more scraps. So I've got over to the side here some extra pieces of book page, and also I've torn up one of the faux vintage invoices and just taken little bits of script and that sort of thing off the invoice. Now again, using double-sided tape, probably just the thin one, I'm going to go in and break up those colour strips just a little bit, using some of the torn strips of the book page and invoice. And it doesn't matter if my strip doesn't run the full length, it's just to break it up a little bit. A lot of it you probably won't see once all the embellishments have been put on top. So this is a great project for using up all of those little tiny scraps that we don't want to throw out. But they're so tiny, it's like, how am I ever going to use it? The only thing I want to do is make sure that if I've got something with lines on it, so this has got like a bit of ledger, I want to try to keep those lines horizontal or vertical. And I might just use I might just use some German book page for this one. So I just need really tiny pieces of text. Okay, so now I want to resize my strips because I have all this extra hanging off. So I'm just going to go along and tear off anything that's overhanging. So next I'm going to come in now, because we have only used double-sided tape, there's like a little lip or edge on all of these bits of paper that is lifting off the page, and I want to accentuate that so that it sort of sticks up a bit more and looks very rough and rugged. It gives the collage strip a real 3D effect. So I'm going to do that with all of the little pieces that we've stuck on, so the little feature pieces on the top as well as the coloured strips. Okay, so hopefully you can see that I've sort of lifted those edges and it's got a real rough sort of 3D look about it now. Now if you want to, you could go ahead and add some gold splashes, or you could get a gold pen, and on one of these, which one was it? I think it was this one. I actually went along the very edge of these bits that were sort of ruffled up with a gold pen, just to give it a bit of a different look. So you could just run your gold pen along the edges of those torn edges. But I'm not going to do that with these ones. And I might do some white splashes at the end on this for something different. So now I want to come in with my little labels. And I picked this sheet because it's mostly neutral sort of colours, or palish colours, but there are a few tickets that sort of matched the colours that I'm working with today, so that's why I've selected these ones. And I'm going to go ahead and cut a few out. Okay. So if I have any that have where I've cut it not very well and I've left too much of the line on, I'm just going to snip that off because I want these to form part of the background. And I'm just going to go in and basically tuck these underneath those ruffled edges. Just to give a little bit more interest. And again, I'm going to use double-sided tape to stick these down. You could use glue. But I'm having so much success with the double-sided tape, I think I'll just stick with it. And again, I like to try to make sure my labels are straight. I don't want any angles. So something like this one I might actually cut in half. Not quite half, but anyway. And tuck a bit there. to be a little more generous with the tape. Tuck that one under there. Now a lot of this you probably won't even see once we put our other bits on. And these would be another thing that you could sort of mass make to this point, and then when you know what you want them for in terms of project theme, you could just add your focal point later on. Alright, so I'll go ahead and do the same with these other two. Okay, so now we've added some more interest to our collage strip. It's just a matter of selecting your focal image or images if you wanted to. So I'm going to use, I think, one of the fairies today. That's a bit unfortunate with that word like that. Maybe I'll put her on that side. And maybe we'll use this one as well. And I'll use a bigger one for the middle. Nope, too big. And maybe we'll put a person on the other one. I'll use my favourite lady. Right, so I think they're the ones that I want to use. Now I want to tear these so they're not so straight. And then I'm going to run my scissors along the edge just to sort of distress that edge as well, so it's not a straight line. And now I just want to give my focal points something else to sit on, just to help them stand up from the background a bit. So I've got, here's some dyed cheesecloth. I might use some of that. And I've also got some bits of dyed lace here as well. So I'll just work on them one at a time, I think. Just cut a little bit of cheesecloth. And this lace is really thick, but I want to try to make sure I don't get any harsh lines, so like I've got a harsh straight line here and here. Now I could probably disguise that by using my lace sort of sideways and then just chop this extra bit off. I think I just want a little wisp of cheesecloth behind there. Now you could use hot glue or something like that to attach this, but for speed today I'm just going to use my tiny attacher. So there we go. And then to finish off, I think I'll just come in with one more little label. And I'm just going to use glue to attach that because it's got to stick to the fabric as well as everything else sticking up. So I'm just going to use a bit of art glitter glue. Upside down, Miss Jane. And there we go. That's our little Scrappy Collage Strip. I did say I was going to do a little bit of white splashes, so I'll just get myself some gesso. And I'm just going to spray a little bit of water onto that gesso. A little bit more. So I want it to be watery enough that I can flick it, but not too watery that it makes it no longer opaque. Now I need a little bit of scrap paper to cover up the faces of my fairies and people, otherwise I might end up getting it right in their eye like I did with the gentleman not long ago. Right, move these well out the way. Okay, no one got any in their eye. Alright, so there we go. So a great scrap buster, because you get to use up all those favourite teeny tiny scraps that you didn't want to throw away. And then you can just use whatever focal image suits your theme or your journal. I will leave links below in the description box to the digitals that I have used in today's project for anyone that asks. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you again next time. Bye!